Question number 9, Kelvin Davis.
To the Minister of Corrections, why was the Law and Order Select Committee not told at the Corrections Estimates hearing last year about either the 2009 or 2014 investigations into organised prison violence at Mount Eden Corrections Facility?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr. Speaker, well, putting aside the mistake in the member's question, the Mount Eden Corrections Facility did not open until 2011. I can inform the member that the 2009 investigation at the old Mount Eden prison found no evidence of organised violence, so was not escalated by officials to a ministerial level, and that the 2014 investigation was brought to the then Minister's attention following the publication of video footage which occurred after the estimates hearing on 24 June 2015.
A supplementary question, Kelvin Davis.
Given her failure to disclose the 2009 investigation into organised violence at Mount Eden, is this the only time she has misled the public about prison management on her watch?
Order, order, order.
Mr. Speaker.
I have a point of order from the Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr. Speaker, that is an offensive question, and that member knows fully well that I had no knowledge of any 2009 fights.
Order.
And he needs to withdraw and apologise.
Order. I'm going to allow the member to rephrase that question, because if you think about the questions, it's directly contrary to the information the Minister has just given in the answer to the primary question. I'll give the opportunity. Order! I don't want to have to ask the member to leave, particularly with a question on the order sheet. Would the member please rephrase his question?
Order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable David Parker.
The similar point of order was raised by Annette King in respect of the answer by Jonathan Coleman in respect of his suggestion that she was fabricating data that she had in a report before her, so I would ask for consistency.
Order. The difficulty with the question, it's not in my mind that similar situation at all. The question then referred to the opening of a facility in 2009. The Minister had already answered that that was not the case. She'd taken exception to the primary question. I'll give the member a chance to ask the question. Supplementary question, Kelvin Davis.
Given the Minister has said that there was a new prison opened, were the prisoners in the old prison also in the new prison?
Well, the member might ask, when in the last 5 years, Mr. Speaker? So the correctional facility, Mount Eden Correctional Facility now, is primarily a remand prison. The average length of stay is 28 days. That member is talking about something that apparently occurred, or he thinks it occurred, 7 years ago. They won't be the same prisoners. 28 days is the average, and there's 30,000 prisoner movements as in and out of that prison every single year.
Supplementary question, Kelvin Davis.
Can this Parliament expect more openness from her and her officials in the future about prison problems, such as at the annual review hearing for corrections tomorrow?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Well, Mr. Speaker, really, it is up to that member, for instance, in a select committee inquiry or hearing, to ask questions. Today, I have seen a member who has not done his homework, who continues to state as questions things that are of dubious value, and in 2009, that member well knows.
Order. I have a point of order. Kelvin Davis.
Hey, Mr. Speaker, I asked, could this Parliament expect more openness from the Minister?
And the Minister was addressing that question. Is there a continuation? No. Further supplementary, Kelvin Davis.
Does she believe that Serco's management of Mount Eden has lived up to the, quote, high standards of professionalism, safety, rehabilitation and security expected by the government, unquote, she placed on them in 2010?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as that member well knows, this matter is subject to the relation of the report into Serco's management is subject to a judicial review hearing, and it would not be appropriate, I think, for me to comment on a matter that's before the courts.
Point of order, Kelvin Davis.
I asked her if she believes they have lived up to her expectations that she expected of them in 2010.
And the Minister, in her answer in addressing that, said she didn't want to go further with an answer because it was currently under, as I understood, a judicial review. That's an answer a Minister can give. It mightn't satisfy the member, but it still addresses the question. Further supplementaries? Kelvin Davis.
How many more fight clubs, investigations, High Court cases and bashed prisoners will it take for her to admit that her prison privatisation agenda is a complete mess and a failure?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr. Speaker, for goodness sake, it might shock that member to know that when we get an awful lot of very violent males together in a prison, sometimes they fight each other. None of that is acceptable, which is why when they do, as they do when Corrections runs the prison or whether Serco runs the prison, strangely enough, they're all prosecuted under the regulations, prison regulations, and some of them actually get further penalties. So actually that happens in every prison. If only that member could actually go to visit someone other than Arthur Taylor and visit some of the prisoners who aren't indulging in that behaviour.
Order. Supplementary question, Mahesh Bindra.
Has Serco reimbursed?
Order. I want less interjection from my right-hand side. Mahesh Bindra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has Serco reimbursed the Crown for any costs incurred as a result of the step-in at Mount Eden Corrections Facility? If so, has the reimbursement covered the cost of the 7 managers, 10 PCOs and 30 officers employed by Corrections to perform the suspended services?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr. Speaker, my understanding is that that is a matter that is being dealt with at the moment, and I cannot take that matter further.
Order. Supplementary question, Mahesh Bindra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Who, if any, has been covering the normal duties of these seconded staff while they are doing Serco's job for them, at what cost and to whom?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as to the cost, that is a matter that's being dealt with, and as to who is doing it, other corrections officers.
Question number 10, Dr. Kennedy Graham.